Through a Scottish Prism, the programme that is unapologetically pro-Scottish independence and anti-Westminster rule. Everything we say here is viewed through a Scottish Prism. Brought to you by Barhead Boy.
Well, hi folks, and welcome back to Through a Scottish Prism. Lovely to have you all back. I hope you and yours are well, and everything's going great at your end. We're back. Parliament's back. We've got lots and lots to discuss. What we don't have with us this week is Mr. Boswell. The Coatbridge Cavalier is now, I don't know what can we say, he's in North Dakota in the USA, just arrived there, getting settled in, so he can't join us this week. But don't worry, we have got a wonderful panel for you this week and lots to discuss. But before that, just remember, if you haven't already subscribed so you never miss another show, hit that subscribe button. And if you like what you hear tonight, don't forget to hit the like button, because that helps us with all the algorithms on YouTube. You can listen to this on YouTube, you can watch it on Twitter, you can watch it on my website, barheadboy.com. You can Twitter, Facebook, Anchor, Spotify, and Rumble. And all those addresses will be in the description box below. So, without any further ado, let's get this show on the road, as they say. And I'm joined immediately from down there on the borders, and I hear the blowy borders. Our Yvonne, I hear you're having bad weather.
Yes, it's quite stormy so far. Suddenly disappear. It's because of a big gust.
Well, when I think the first topic we've got to discuss tonight, I don't think that's going to happen. I have a funny feeling that the weather will be kind to us. All will be revealed shortly. And of course, up there in Clackmannanshire, we have our Eva. Eva, my friend, how are you?
Hi, Roddy. In good, Nick. Thank you. Back from my travels, and once more in God's few chosen acres in Clackmannanshire, the best wee county in the country.
So you say, but I noticed you were having a black pudding competition. Who won? Irish or Scots?
It was a draw between the Irish and the Scots black pudding, but up my sleeve, I've got some strawberry black pudding for next week's competition.
That's the winner. That's the winner. Mate, McLeod the butcher, and then many years ago I sold him his cash register. I don't know if he's still got it. Right. Years and years ago. Anyway, welcome. Thanks. But I'm absolutely delighted to welcome a newbie to the show, Charlie Abel from up there in Aberdeen. Charlie, welcome to Through a Scottish Prism. Thanks for being here. You, of course, are a candidate in the upcoming by-election we're having up there in Aberdeen, and I've got to get it right, Dyce, Bucksburn and Danestone. And you are going to be the Alba candidate in that particular ward.
Yes, that's right.
Well, we wish you well. And folks, if you've got any spare time, you can get in there and help out our Charlie. And let's get this Alba vote up and running and moving. And if you've got any spare pennies you want to help contribute, that will also be gratefully received. So, folks, Parliament's back. Things are moving again. We've got lots and lots to discuss, but the first thing that's got to be discussed here, Eva, and it refers all to Yvonne's worried about the weather, but there's no need to, because we've had divine intervention. Pope Francis himself has come out in the side of independence, has he not?
I'm not sure if it's as clear-cut as that, but apparently the Pope popped up in an interview today to do with Spain and Catalonia and whether or not priests should be involved in politics. And he was talking about independence movements in various parts of the world. And he mentioned Scotland, and he said that the Scottish issue, the Scottish question of independence had been resolved, if I get the words right, it had been resolved the English way.
Yeah.
Which I thought was a bit disappointing for a pontiff to pontificate on Scottish affairs and refer to the English way. Is that the way that these things are looked at from beyond these islands? Do they think that the English imposed something upon us?
Don't pontiffs pontificate? Is that?
Yeah, but about stuff that they'd seem not to know terribly much about. And if he does know what he's talking about, somebody's got to him. Because he seems to think the English told us what to do and we went along and we did it. So
well, I think he maybe thought, the English just ignored it and hoped it would go away.
Well,
just ignored it and put their own case forward as usual, put themselves first to the detriment of our lovely wee nation.
It might be a
so
compliment, though. Like,
there you go.
maybe meaning something else by that, you know.
And so I guess now, if he's come out now saying we've lost the lap call vote, that's it, it's gone. But there you go, Yvonne, you don't have to worry about losing your internet connection. We have a divine intervention today.
Oh, well, that's reassuring to know. But a lot of Catholic priests were the backbone of the Irish community and really stood up for a united Ireland. In fact, the Irish priests were quite a political bunch. So maybe we should see this papal intervention as something to be encouraged.
Well, as I say, the divisions in the west of Scotland in particular, maybe not a great thing. But the thing that I found, Yvonne, that got to me today is bad enough that we've got the guy who wrote the vow working for Nicola Sturgeon as his communications director, or whatever they call him. But today she's employed D.C. Thompson guy. We should throw in McLennan. It was about Sir Robert McLennan was the guy who said we couldn't have the pound during the referendum. She's got him on board, and now she's brought on some guy from D.C. Thompson onto her economics committee. She does like those hardcore unionist places to bring in people to help her, doesn't she?
Well, is D.C. Thompson, are they the people behind Beryl the Peril?
Yeah, among other things, on the Sunday Post and a few other instantly forgettable news items.
It's probably a sign of desperation. You know, she's still breaking the internet with calls for her to resign. There are various disruptions in Holyrood, and again from protesters who are calling for her to resign. And these calls for her to go are coming from the far right of the party, as well as the socialist side of the party of Holyrood. So she's upset a lot of people. And this business appointment, it's another six-figure salary, is really, I think, one of the last sort of desperate acts of a First Minister who is clinging on.
All she needs now, Charlie, is to bring in someone from Tunnock's, and she'll have the full set.
Yeah, I think it's concerning when you see who your leader of the independence movement is surrounding herself with. I think that causes concern for many of us.
But we're just getting told by the box, I think, so we know. I don't know if he is getting paid. I think it might be an unpaid one. This one just expenses only, his appointment. I'm not sure. But the one bit of good news that came out today, Eva, was that the police have decided to stop halt their inquiries into our lane of the Merkin fame. That's now, they've decided that they're not even going to look into it.
And I should think so too. You know, that was one of the most disgraceful aspects of this entire debacle with the GRR bill. I noted, as you will have too, and I know Yvonne certainly did, that there were multiple complaints made about Elaine's behaviour in Holyrood on the day that she showed everybody on Merkin. People were complaining that this was an indecent exposure. What a lot of rubbish. It was a piece of artificial fur worn on a pair of tights. There was nothing remotely indecent about it. There was far greater indecency has been perpetrated by some of the trans reactionary activists whose behaviour within Holyrood and out with Holyrood last year and this has been last year and the year before has been despicable in the context of threatening and abusive behaviour. There's absolutely no comparison to be made between Elaine's behaviour, which was an entirely proper protest, no matter how much people might have thought that it was inappropriate. It was a traditional old-fashioned protest, as has gone on by women for centuries. I contrast that on the one hand with the violent, abusive conduct of several of the people from the other side, and I know where the police ought to have been conducting their inquiries, and it was never against Elaine Miller. I would add that several well-known lawyers commented on Twitter immediately that there was no indecency at all, and at its very, very, very worst, perhaps a breach of the peace would have been committed, that was highly unlikely. So for anybody to suggest indecency was really taking things beyond the degree of ridiculousness that this entire debate has already seen. So good on you, Elaine.
Absolutely, and hopefully, Yvonne, this is the start of maybe sort of the cessation of the madness. People getting, police visits for putting a ribbon around a lamppost, or, as we've highlighted here, this demonstration in the Parliament.
It's a great victory for Elaine and her magic muff, and I am so pleased that Police Scotland have erred on the side of caution instead of trying to chase around to try and get witnesses to complain. They've tried that once before, and of course it failed. And so, yes, great victory for Elaine. And I have to say, a very effective one, because not that there's very many domestic bust-ups down in the borders, but if there is any sign of disharmony, I reach for the hem of my skirt and tell my husband women won't wisht, and it calms him right down.
Oh, Evelyn, what would we do without you? Charlie, I don't know if you've been on the doors yet, but is there any talk up in Aberdeen about what Elaine did at the Parliament? Was there anyone horrified? Was there anyone upset by it?
No, everybody, I think, is proud of Elaine for standing up for women's rights, and people are aghast at why the police were involved to start with, but at least the police have dropped the thing now, and she's not in any trouble. But people are angry with the GRR, and people are going to protest and are going to make their views known, because everybody wants to protect women's rights that we speak to anyway. I don't see much opinion on the street coming from the other direction.
Yeah, there is, Eva. There's more and more dissension beginning to show. I mean, this week we had the First Minister's questions had to be stopped because of demonstrations outside and inside the chamber itself, well, not the chamber, in the gallery. There's another meeting, which I believe our Eva's talking at, on the 25th of January outside Butte House. There is this one that happened this week from the Tories and the Family Party and others, and they, shouting for a resignation. I mean, a couple of years ago, you would never have imagined this beginning to happen.
There are several factors at play, Roddy. I mean, obviously, the GRR bill is a major one, and people are waking up to it, and sometimes they're waking up a little bit late. But the difficulty with GRR from the outset has been that the consultations were online, they were not well publicised, and the ordinary man or woman in the street wouldn't necessarily have known what the GRR bill proposed. So the more that sunlight is cast upon the GRR bill, its implications and its effects, the more concerned the man and woman in the street become, and that will continue to be the case. And it's highly unfortunate that it's been a very divisive issue for the independence movement. But if you look at this as a multifactorial position that the First Minister finds herself in, with the GRR bill and the difficulties that it has brought, we have then got very major disappointments, concerns and frustrations in the wider independence movement about the lack of cogent movement and the lack of cogent action, the lack of vitality, the lack of enthusiasm, the apparent lack of planning, all the things that have gone wrong. The wheels have come off the SNP independence wagon, and this is more and more evident as every day goes by. We've said before that anybody with half an ounce of common sense who was devoted to independence would have had multiple plans ready and waiting, if not already implemented, for the day when the Supreme Court gave the decision. And that's not me saying the Supreme Court should have been applied to, because I don't think it should have been. No. The independence referendum bill should have been presented in Holyrood and proceeded with. And we should have been saying, as a united Scottish movement for independence, we should have been saying to Westminster, we're passing this bill. It's going to become an act as far as we're concerned. If you don't like it, you take us to court, as opposed to the other way about. the optics on that internationally would have been priceless. But of course, that's not what happened. So the SNP and the Scottish Government should have been prepared for the fallout after the refusal by the Supreme Court, and they should have had assemblies set up. They should have had the Independence Convention, which was promised in January 2020 by Ms Sturgeon. That should have been up and running. There is so much more that they ought to have done, and the frustrations within the SNP are beginning to be seen. We know, for example, that Angus Brendan McNeil's been quite vociferous and quite annoyed about a lack of progress. He, amongst many others, would like to see several different options on the table, not simply the one which we understand the SNP NEC will consider tomorrow. Add to that general dissatisfaction in relation to accident and emergency problems within the NHS, issues in relation to strikes and public sector pay rises, lawyers who were on strike before everybody else was, and there are a lot of people at the moment very, very unhappy with the Scottish Government and its performance across the board. That's unfortunate for us in the independence movement, because we want to see a competent government so that we can show to the rest of Scotland and to those soft-nosed, look, Scotland can do it better by itself than Westminster has done. And for that reason, we in Alba particularly have to continue to promote all the good things that happen in Scotland, and all the benefits that there are of independence, and describe to people the country that Scotland will be when we are independent, rather than allow folk to stay in the doldrums that unfortunately for the past couple of years Ms Sturgeon has taken us down into.
It is shocking what's going on, and we're going to have a long discussion on some things that have been happening towards independence or about it. But the other thing, just while we're on it, on GRR and whatnot, Yvonne, a lot of us on this show and out throughout social media and elsewhere have been saying, warning certain things would happen, and we're no, it won't happen. And this week it's been announced that a 16-year-old girl down in Derby in Primark has been sexually assaulted in the changing rooms, which they made open. I don't take any pleasure in saying we told you so, but Primark, we told you so. And it's starting to come home to roost.
Well, Primark is changing its unisex policy because what happened to that woman isn't an isolated incident. It's happening. It's happened in several branches of Primark, and where they try to introduce this unisex policy. And, we've just listened to Eva talking so eloquently about the potential that Scotland has to be a great country. And when you consider all the philanthropists, the inventors, the pioneers in medicine and science, and all the great people, and now we have a parliament full of people who can't or won't tell us what a woman is. It's absolutely bonkers. And it's, well, the signs are already there. Complete dissent in the parliament so that it is unable to function. And it's going to increase. The protests will increase. And it will get worse. And we'll see some, I think, rather unholy alliances coming together, united against Nicola Sturgeon. She will have to go. I think it's actually going to be a matter of weeks, certainly no longer than months. This is going to be the crunch year for her.
Well, I would think so, because there's a lot of stuff brewing. Charlie, when you go on the doors, there's no doubt that GRR is going to come up, and single-space toilets, etc. Alba have got a good case for that and have been seen to be leading proponents of women's rights. Are you confident that you can carry that message onto the doorstep?
Yes, and one of our policies is that if we get our independence, we would have a constitution, and women's rights would be written into the constitution to protect them. So that would be, there would be no discussion about it after that.
And of course, you've got a women's conference up there on the 17th of February. Is that right? Which will be the day of the by-election.
The day of the by-election is 23rd of February.
So it's, you know, the week before the by-election, and these two wonderful ladies here are having a women's event up there in Aberdeen. You got to get down there,
yeah.
Charlie. You joined in. As things are going, you know, independence has never, Yvonne, been more needed. And we noticed this week, another one was that the UK economy is spiralling downwards. And if you remember, you know, in 2014, the unionists telling us, oh, you're too weak, you're too poor, you know, you can't have the pound, you'll go burst in a week. And the AAA rating, you know, you need the UK AAA rating. This week, the UK has been reduced again, this time to was a AA -3 rating. It's the only country in the G7 that's not showing any growth. We're in recession. There is no longer an economic case for the union, is there?
Absolutely not. But you know, the storm on the horizon for me is, and we're going back to it again, is the GRR, because there are loads of women out there, and I'm sure Charlie will have met quite a few while he's been out campaigning. Lots of women are saying this GRR fiasco is more important to them than independence. That's how, you know, the tail is now wagging the dog, that women are saying our priority is to get rid of the GRR, and then we'll focus on independence. And I'm trying to persuade them, well, you know, the Alba party is independence through and through, will not waver, but it is also for women, and very much behind the Women Won't Wish campaign. And so we have to persuade these women that the best way to vote is for Alba, because you get 2 in 1. You get unconditional support for women's rights, as well as unwavering support for independence. But I'm sure that Charlie's meeting that on the doorstep. And I know Eva and I are both looking forward to going up to Aberdeen soon to help him in his campaign. And to everybody who is listening today, if you have friends in Aberdeen, especially in the Dyce area where Charlie is standing, please get on the phone to your relatives, to your friends, and tell them to vote for Charlie.
Yeah, absolutely. But Eva, the fact is that the 51% of the population is female, and as Yvonne has articulated, the Alba party has been standing for women's rights. It's one of the things that brought us into being.
Yep.
And it's time for the women to step up to the plate and support us. Saying, oh, I've lost faith in all politicians is not going to make GRR go away. You need political power to make things happen.
Yes, indeed, Roddy. Now, I have, like you, fought for Scottish independence all my life. I was fighting for that since I was at school. I've not only done it as an adult. I did not think that over the course of the last few years, I was also going to have to fight for women's rights. I thought we had done those battles. I didn't know we were going to have to do them all again. But we will do them all again. And it was, as you would understand, the privilege of my life to be asked by Alec to join Alba. And obviously I was there at the launch. And one of the very first things I was tasked to do was to help to write the Women Inequalities Policy. It has been there since Alba's birth. It will not alter. We are 100% focused on the need for women to maintain the rights they have. They were hard fought, as we've often said, and we talk about women as adult human females. A woman is not someone who used to be a man. When we talk about single sex spaces, we talk about biological sex, because women need single sex spaces. They were invented and provided for very valid reasons. We are not saying that all men are predators. What we are saying is it is impossible generally to look at a man and to know whether or not he might be a predator. So for that reason, for the safety, dignity and self-respect of women and girls, Alba will, for as long as I live and those who come after me, promote, safeguard and maintain, and as Charlie said, write into the constitution of an independent Scotland that the rights of women and girls are sacrosanct. They will be safeguarded, they will be maintained. I have spoken at multiple women's events, so has Yvonne. I've been at a couple of events in Alba. There's another one in Alba on the 4th of February, an all-day event, the Forth Valley Feminist Conference. It was a fantastic event last year with dozens of very highly qualified, eloquent, experienced speakers. That will be repeated this year. It's a date for the diary. The 17th of February is when Yvonne and I will speak in Aberdeen. And shortly after that, Alba is having a national women's conference. That's what the rights of women mean to Alba. They are sacrosanct. They will not be sacrificed. And we think it would be entirely appropriate for the women of Scotland who believe in independence, who feel let down by the SNP, to join Yvonne and me and Tasmina and Corrie and Denise and Heather and all the other women of Scotland who seek independence and who know beyond a shadow of a doubt that with Alba, their rights, their safeties, their protections, their changing rooms, their hospital wards will be protected. No question of it.
Well said, Eva. It's good to know that. I hope you've memorised all that, Charlie, for when you hit the doors and you can repeat verbatim whatever Eva's been saying. But it is important that the voters get to hear this, Charlie, that we are on the side, not just of women and young girls, but of everybody, but certainly independence and women's rights are the two main things that are happening just now.
Yeah, and also in Aberdeen, we're in the energy capital of Europe, remember, and I'm sitting here with my tweed jacket on, freezing, and in my house, so that's another issue too.
Yeah, well, you made a great point there, Charlie, because I noticed today as well that while we're talking about how things are going bad, the economy is tanking, everything's going down, Centrica, who own British Gas, are going to declare an 8-fold increase in their earnings. There's not any windfall tax. Now, it's as well, Phil's not here. He's not a great one. He doesn't love windfall taxes. I do. But that's a great thing, having different opinions, even on here. But the fact that they're going to be with the shareholders are going to get huge payouts, Charlie. But the people whose doors you're going to be knocking on over the next few weeks are struggling to pay their bills. They don't know how they're going to pay these huge bills. Yeah, it is disgusting. And it's another reason why we need to be independent.
Yeah, what a lot of them don't realise is that as Scotland being a sovereign country, that these are our resources and they belong to us. They're our resources and they're taken from us. We are not getting anything for them. The UK government might get licenses. There might be some tax paid on it, but it's sold back to us at prices we can't afford. And if they weren't so greedy, we might not get so angry about it, but they've been so greedy and they're getting greedier and greedier and they're pushing all of us into poverty. And we've had enough. We're wanting our resources back, we're wanting our country back, and we want to run things ourselves. And only independence is going to make that happen. No renegotiation of any new treaty or union or anything. There's absolutely no other way than full independence for Scotland, for Scottish people to help us.
Yeah, correct. When I was a young lad, joined the party, and that wasn't yesterday, the slogan was independence, nothing less.
Yeah.
And that stayed with me, and I still say that one. That is it, independence, nothing less.
Yeah.
And what's that great phrase that Kenny McCaskill was energy rich and a fuel poor in Scotland, Eva. And that's just a fact. And it's disgraceful. We give England 25% of their electricity needs, 100% of their oil needs. And yet we're going to have people literally who are going to die in the next few weeks of hypothermia. It's just so wrong.
It's actually heartbreaking when you break it down into what's happening to individual people in households and streets and whole swathes of the country. I don't know what the average bill in Scotland really is. We hear it's somewhere between £2,500 and £4,000 per annum. I don't know, but it doesn't really matter. It's far too high. We're being shafted on a daily basis. It costs far more for Scotland to get energy back out of the national grid than it does anywhere else in the country. Our wind was sold off, as you know, as we've touched on many times before, in a reverse auction. You know, we missed out on the oil fund that Norway had. No Stetsons or Stavangers for anybody here. What we got instead was Thatcher, and we bankrolled developments in London, and the UK became ever more London-centric. It seems that thus far we're going to lose out on a wind fund because the Scottish Government seems singularly incapable of using even those resources to their best advantage. They didn't sell them off as high as they could have. They could have made more money from what they've sold already. They could be doing something to renegotiate future contracts in the context of keeping something in the bank for Scotland and having a wind fund. As it is, our people will continue to worry about heating or eating. We'll have a sticking plaster now and again, as opposed to radical change in the form of a national energy corporation. We were promised that by the SNP a few years ago. They reneged on their promise. They then had a motion to that effect passed at their own conference again last year, and within 5 minutes had reneged on it again. Where is it? Why don't we have a national energy corporation? Why are we not doing these things? We're not doing it because we don't have the political will, and at times that within the government we don't have the ability. How can that be? Scots built the world. Why are we not rebuilding our own country? You know, there are so many of these services, but energy particularly at the moment is one that should be owned and run nationally for the sake of the citizens of this country, not to put profits, inordinately enormous profits, in the pockets of a chosen few who happen to be the biggest donors or the biggest, you know, lickers of backsides, quite frankly, because that's what we seem to see going on a daily basis. Scots really have to get the finger out and tell the Scottish Government that this can't go on. At the moment, as we know, the Greens are the tail that is wagging the dog. So we had Michael Matheson during the week talking in terms of a just transition when he launched the Scottish Government energy policy. And he spoke about how in 20 years or so, Charlie, correct me if I'm wrong, we'll not be doing the oil and gas exploration anymore. That'll have finished. Could maybe Michael Matheson go to Aberdeen and speak to some of the people that are involved in oil and gas exploration and tell them that their jobs have only got another 20 years left? That's not going to go down too well. But we know again that this is one of these policies that's in that Butte House agreement to keep the Greens on side. It's there to keep the SNP in power. It's not there because it's for the best for the people of Scotland. We know we have to develop green policies, but we know equally well, as Phil often says, that oil and gas are not going to suddenly stop being needed. We're not going to suddenly stop using them. We need to be sensible about these things, bring everybody on board and stop having silly press conferences where we make grand announcements that actually there's no possibility of them being fulfilled. It's a wee bit like your returnable deposit scheme for bottles or the bikes that were going to be provided for everybody, or the free laptops. It's another grand announcement. It's not going to follow through. It's not going to happen. But it's bad patter as far as people's jobs and livelihoods and futures are concerned.
Yeah. Shutting down the North Sea won't make your energy bills any cheaper because you'll just have to buy it at the international price from another country, and it won't be green because it'll be shipped in from the other side of the world. So it's a nonsensical idea. We should be using the resources we've got, getting the last that we can out of the North Sea, but doing it in a clean way, and we can use the hydrogen capture, and that will benefit us. Masses of oil left in the North Sea. There could be 50 to 100 years still there. And in that time, we could be building an oil fund like the Norwegians did.
Yep. Which is now over $2 trillion, I believe. But one of the problems we've got is I think a lot of people seem to think that the oil that comes out of the North Sea or anywhere just runs cars and planes, and that's the problem. They don't realise that, I mean, everything, plastics, everything you look around your house just now, most of it comes from oil. So you're not going to replace everything. You could, I don't think they will, but you could replace every car and make it electrical. But you're still going to need oil coming out the ground to make things, just basic things like a syringe, for example, is made from oil products. It's just one of many things. But the other one, Yvonne, we're getting a lot of strikes. We were talking about it earlier, how everyone, it seems, is now coming out and strike, all the public services. And of course, the government and their fifth column in the media, who are listening. Yes, we're referring to you, Mr. Daily Express, who's listening in today, as usual. And a lot are talking about the greedy unions. It's terrible that they're asking for this pay rise. You never hear the media or this government or a Labour government saying to the bosses, wait a minute, guys, you're being greedy. You're taking too much profits. I go back to British Gas declaring 8 times normal earnings. No one's saying that's wrong, Yvonne. But when a nurse who's attending a food bank asks for a half decent pay, oh, she's a greedy person and needs to budget better.
Now, I'm glad you've mentioned the unions, because I think the unions could hold the key to a lot of our woes. I think that, it's obvious now that the unions are trying to create a situation where we have a general strike. And this would probably work in Scotland very well in our demand for independence. And we should work through the unions to call a general strike in Scotland and bring everything to a halt until we get independence. And if Scotland stops working, they'll be squealing like pigs in London within days, because Scotland's economy is boosting the lifestyles of those in London. And if suddenly the land of milk and honey, which is what Scotland is, if it suddenly switches off the tap, then we'll get to see the real nature of the relationship between Edinburgh and London.
Well, I'm an old lefty, as I love to talk about all the time, and I am a lefty. But I don't have the faith, and I've mentioned it as well, the trade unions. And I mean, there was an example this week, Charlie, where Frances O'Grady, who was very high, I think she might even have been in charge of the TUC for a while, she became ennobled. Vic Feather started it back in the 60s, if you remember that. He was the first. That's when I knew that the Labour Party and the Labour movement were done. When trade union bosses are becoming lords and joining the establishment. My problem with the unions is that they're too affiliated to Labour, and we do need a general strike. I agree with Yvonne, Charlie. We need a general strike, not just for independence, but to get decent pensions, to get decent pay for the nurses, the railwaymen, for everyone, all our public sector workers, for everyone, a decent wage, a living wage for everyone in the country. But the trade unions don't want to upset the Labour Party and their chances of election. That's my argument. Am I being unfair?
No. I mean, if you cast your mind back to remember Neil Kinnock, the Labour Prime Minister, he's a Lord now as well, isn't he? They've got a bit of a track record there, and they're supposed to be representing the working man, yet they're up there with our, well, I'll use the word enemy, but they're up there supping champagne and wearing the ermine while the rest of it, and preaching to the rest of us that they're supporting us. So it doesn't really look like that when you're looking up from down here,
But here we are, Eva.
They are the enemy. It's the boss class. And when we hear about nurses going to food to supplement their wages, it's horrific. We're one of the top 10 wealthiest countries in the world, and our children are growing up with rickets, with starvation, nutrition deficiency. It's obscene. It really is. And the trade unions could be the key. And a general strike in Scotland, I think, would be the answer to all of our ills. You know, just a few months ago, the government was asking us to clap the nurses. Now we're being told to slap them because they're demanding a wage which will enable them to put food on the table without having to go to the food bank. And one of the things that I can never understand is why the great and the good think that they can come up to Scotland, and yes, this is King Charles, come up to Scotland and visit our food banks. We've got so much more on offer here, but all you see are they make a trip and go to the food banks, and you get Rishi Sunak feeding the poor and giving them financial advice and asking them what investments they've made. I mean, these people just aren't real.
Yeah, we've got warm banks now as well. Warm banks, food banks. We've got vans going around from the electric companies that are trying to help people by putting smart meters into their homes. But if you can't afford your power and you can't afford to pay in advance, they cut off your meter. So you haven't got power. So you can't afford to cook your food. You're living off things like pot noodles if you can get boiling water from somewhere. And you're having to rely on the food banks. And then the children are going to have already malnutrition.
But we can find the money for bombs and bullets to give to the Ukrainian people to tell them to fight a war that they can't win, a war that at the current trajectory is going to last at least 10 years. And in Europe, and it's just a miracle that we haven't been dragged into this war with Russia yet. But there's still the danger of that happening. And if we can't afford to keep our pensioners warm, then where on earth are the billions of pounds coming from to tool up the Ukrainian people? Something's not right there.
Yeah, well, but it's all. I mean, that's another whole ball game, and it is something that I find obscene. I mean, I'm a peacenik, as you know, and I would have a ceasefire tomorrow. I don't think it's going to last 10 years. I wouldn't be surprised if it lasts 10 weeks, the way things are going just now, Yvonne. And then I don't know how the West are going to play it, because they've lied throughout about how wonderfully well the Ukrainians are doing. They're winning. They're about to get slaughtered. And it's disgusting, and they shouldn't be dying. There's people in Ukrainian citizens, both ethnic Russian and ethnic Ukrainian, who are dying unnecessarily because people in Washington and London and in Brussels are playing politics and playing ideology. It's a disgrace. But to bring us back to our main thing, Eva, this week, and I've kept it to the sort of the last, towards the back end of this show, we have been critical, rightly so, of the SNP, who, as you stated earlier in the programme, had no plan when the Supreme Court made their decision and said, well, we'll have a wee special conference in 88 days' time. They were so urgent for them. And so in March, they've changed their spring conference, which I should just, while I'm on their spring conference, they're never going to have another one because they said they can no longer make profit out of it. Now, you and I, Eva, were in the party long ago when the conferences were about getting policies and uniting and bonding with each other. It wasn't about making profits. But so they're waiting 88 days, but they seem to be stoking the fires. If I could just make a few observations, three of the four stooges come out this week. And I would like to start with Alan Smith, and Techie can put up the picture for me. Alan Smith, who suggested, Eva, that going to the Supreme Court was, and I quote, an inspired risk that paid off. Now, I know it's your MP. Do you believe it was an inspired risk that paid off?
Alan Smith knows damn fine. It was neither an inspired risk, nor was it something that paid off. He knows that. He's just spinning because that's what he does. And, you know, since time immemorial, the problem with the Scots has been that there is division. And there are Scots who promote division because it suits their own purposes. We saw that, I think it was yesterday, with the announcement of these green free ports. We elect a government to do a job for us, which is to achieve independence. They're doing every other damn thing under the sun apart from trying to achieve independence. Alan Smith knows that. He's prolonging his own position. He's keeping his own feet under the table and his backside on a warm, comfy seat down there. Now, in the context of the green free ports, that's never been a policy approved at an SNP conference. In fact, it was a policy that the SNP opposed. I could turn myself green in disgust that I find myself for once in my life agreeing with Ross Greer of the Green Party when he's criticised the awards of this Greenport status to both Cromarty and Firth. Because in the words of Craig DL, these are tax haven zones where you'll have the privilege of working for minimal conditions, no guarantee of union recognition or living wage protections, and your boss and shareholders will pocket profits instead of paying taxes. By God, how far has the SNP fallen that the First Minister was actually welcoming the creation of 2 green free ports? Now, one of them is going to be on the 4th. So it's going to involve Grangemouth, parts of Falkirk and what have you, which is only 12, 14, 15 miles away from me here in Clackmannanshire. Do you seriously think that that's not going to have an adverse impact upon the people of Clackmannanshire and Stirling? Businesses are going to get tax incentives to set up within the Freeport area. So they're not going to come to Clackmannanshire or Stirling or the parts of Fife that are already stuffed. They're going to go to the areas where they get the advantages. And this is created by an SNP government in cahoots with the Tories on what is supposed to be an independence watch. Alan Smith knows this. Pete Wishart knows this. Stuart MacDonald knows this. The First Minister and John Swinney are actively promoting Tory policies to the detriment of the people of Scotland. That is not what they were elected to do. They were elected to get our independence, and if it was left to them, I would be sitting twiddling my thumbs another 40 years for when I started. No having it, and neither is anybody else in Alba. That's why we're having the National Assembly on Saturday, and so when this show goes out on Sunday, we'll be celebrating the fact that it's been another successful exchange of ideas of people across the movement who are determined to see independence with all due haste.
Yeah, it's also no coincidence, Eva, that the announcement came the day after Sonic made his day trip up to Scotland and took some smiley photographs, and she was smiling as well with Sturgeon, and then they announced this disgrace. Now, another one that came out to me about that, now I don't know if it's true, but someone says also the possibility, because they're coming from Westminster, that Scots law will be not counting in these areas, that English law will be the precedent in the Freeport areas. Now, I don't know if that's true or not, but if it is, and the SNP have signed up to that, it is yet another disgraceful act.
That'd be a betrayal, wouldn't it?
Oh, well, I would say so. But while our man, because also the other thing Alan Smith's doing, Yvonne, is pushing, we need to convert the soft nose. Now, I've said this once, I'll say it again, a dozen times maybe. If you, after 12 years of the Conservative government, of austerity, of COVID, of Brexit, of bedroom tax, of redundancies, of all the shit that's going on, and you're still a soft no, you're no. You're a hardcore Brit nat, and you're also a nutter. So there is no such thing as a soft no. I think the case has been done, but Alan Smith's promoting it. But while he's promoting it, you have to help me here, Yvonne. Alan Smith is saying, push for the soft nose, it's an inspired risk. Meanwhile, Wishart, our pal Wishart, the Perth and North Perthshire's finest, nothing, who a few weeks ago was blocking anyone for suggesting we hold a plebiscite election at Westminster. and saying how stupid and idiotic it was. As soon as Nicola came out and hinted at it, he suddenly thinks it's a great idea. And and if we had a de facto referendum at Holyrood, there would be a backlash, and Douglas Ross would become First Minister. So says the brains of Perth. He doesn't even understand the Scotland Act, and he's making a comment because Douglas Ross nor anyone else, the Greens and the SNP control it with a majority. They can stop anyone. But here's one of the people who is supposed to be leading the fight, doesn't even understand the Scotland Act, Yvonne.
No, he's just a poisonous old trout. I really think we should just not even, it's like being sucked into a black hole, trying to get into the mind of Wishart. Let's not go there. But I want to pick up on these free ports because it's just another political gimmick. I was born in Consett, where there was a big steelworks, and the Tories said, if you can make it productive for 3 months running, we'll save it. And the steel workers made it productive for 6 months running, and they still axed it. Then what followed was this mass unemployment. I mean, it resulted in the death of a town. And there were these enterprise zones that were hailed, money from Europe, which is an avenue that's gone now. And they started talking about these wonderful enterprise zones that are going to encourage people to open new businesses in this derelict area. And the net effect of it was the promises never materialized. The businesses that did come wanted a ready workforce, which they had. And then it was called the concertization of jobs, where they paid cheap wages for skilled workmen. So, and I remember the enterprise zones being hailed as this brilliant new device that will bring in a wealth of jobs and everybody will live happily ever after. And of course, it didn't materialize. And this is the same SH1T we're now getting out of the SNP over the ports, the free ports, which, sounds really good, doesn't it? And it's going to bring in masses of jobs and it's going to encourage businesses. It's just a reinvention of the enterprise zone. And it doesn't matter how much lipstick you put on this pig, it's still a pig.
Absolutely. We had the same nonsense about trickle-down economics. That would be great for us. Are you in favour of these free ports, Charlie, or are you as disgusted as the rest of us?
No, I'm not in favour of the free ports, and as I understand it, Alba's policy is not to respect them or agree with them in the event of independence.
No, it's just
off you, and I would be concerned that what the Scottish government are doing by it. It's almost like throwing a spanner in the works of us trying to negotiate our independence, because it makes it further more complications that we'll have to deal with. The government of independence shouldn't be given away or reasons where we can get revenue from our resources, because people are needing taxes to help our NHS and to help get our cheaper fuels and all this, and we're setting up little places where we can be robbed blind by corporations, and we don't know what else goes on in these free ports, because not only is there no taxes, there's no checks on customs, and you don't know what's going on. You're opening
no workers' rights either.
Activity. It's dodgy as dodgy can be.
Yeah, for sure. Eva, going back in the SNP days, I remember Alex Salmond saying when he was leader, we need to show the Scottish people, give them confidence that we can govern and govern well. And from that, then we can, and he did that, and he got us a referendum that was 6 MPs, not 48, 6 MPs, and he did it. But we've just got worse and worse and worse at everything we do. And this is just pandering to the Tories in London. And while we're doing that on these free ports, the third one of the three stooges who I mentioned was our MacDonald, the guy, the Bucklands guy, the redcoat, who is now a big spokesman on defence and Russian, all things Russian. He said, "Oh, I hate to fall out with my pal Pete Wishart, but he's wrong." So he's contradicting them both. He thinks that there should be no de facto plebiscites. He thinks there should be something else we should work on. He doesn't know what it is, but it's not to be a referendum, Section 30. It's not to be a de facto plebiscite election at Holyrood. It's not to be a de facto plebiscite election at Westminster. It's kind of confusing. If I could just throw this at you, Eva. Actually, Angus Brendan McNeill, one of the few who's been credible throughout all of this, he went to Dunfermline constituency, and here he did something quite novel. Eva, you're going to love this. And all you SNP people listening, he went and listened to SNP members. Shock a Rooney. And when they had a wee chat and talked about it, they said, we want the First Minister to collapse Holyrood and have a plebiscite in October of this year, as promised. That's what the membership in that constituency, and I don't expect many constituencies will disagree with that. In fact, I think that most constituencies would agree with that. But what they also said is what I liked, and is the fact is that, and if it doesn't work immediately, then the next election is a plebiscite, and the next election is a plebiscite, and the next election is a plebiscite until we win. We only need to win once. They've got to win every time. Exactly. Now, there's the contrasting things. The three MPs, or three stooges if you prefer, having three different opinions, none of them actually moving things forward, but the members saying, we want you to collapse the Parliament in time for October. Will they listen?
Well, a number of issues arise. First of all, we have to think about the length of time that Pete Wishart has been an MP. And throughout those decades, his first job has been to achieve independence for Scotland. He's not achieved it, but you would have thought that he would know by now the method by which it would be achieved. He doesn't. I think, if my memory serves me correctly, Stuart MacDonald would have been elected in 2015. So he's been an MP for 7 years and he's not got an answer either. Alan Smith was 2019, so he's had 3 years. So those three gentlemen between them seem not to know what the route to independence is. And we know from the research done by various pollsters and the analysis done very forensically by Stuart Campbell, Reverend Stu from Wings, that actually between Alex Salmond's resignation and Nicola Sturgeon's current position, the dial has only moved very, very slightly in the context of support for independence. What we also know from previous experience in the run-up to the 2014 referendum is when you fix a date, when you have a focused, concerted campaign with an end point, people become energised, they become more enthusiastic, they become optimistic, they get their arses in gear and they campaign like there was no tomorrow, because this is the day, this is the hour, and there is something to go for. There's fire in the belly and fire in the heart. That is what we need. We also know that the Scottish franchise for Holyrood includes 16 to 18-year-olds and European citizens. Those people are excluded from a Westminster franchise. So nobody, Pete, Stuart, Alan, with any political acumen or pride or hope or love of their country would consider that a plebiscite at Westminster was the right thing. Nowadays, they would say it's a plebiscite in Holyrood. And so all political brains should be directed towards how do you establish a plebiscite in Holyrood. And it's easy. The people of Dunfermline have told you. They told Angus, we've said it often enough already, all that has to happen is that the First Minister resigns, And when she is not replaced within 28 days, the presiding officer is legally obliged in terms of the Scotland Act 1998 to call a Holyrood election. That could be done for 19 October 2023 this year, the date of the referendum. When we have that date, the campaign will move up a gear. When we have that date and we operate as Scotland United for Independence, we will have a victorious movement. These are the actions that have to be taken. And Alan Smith, Stuart MacDonald and Pete Wisher, if they don't get their shoulder behind that wheel, they will learn who they are, and they will forever be yesterday's men, not the tomorrow people that the Alba party is.
Hear, hear. Well, you will not believe this, ladies and gentlemen. We've run out of time again. But we only had a couple of things left this week, which is quite good. We had a couple of things left. I just want to make a quick one on that. It was one of the most obnoxious Tories. I know that's, obnoxious and Tory runs together. But Andrew Bridgeton, who's been kicked out. I mean, you've got to be something pretty special to get kicked out of the Tory party. But he referred to the COVID vaccinations as worse than the Holocaust. And even that was a bridge too far for the Tories. And he's been thrown out. Anyway, thank you. What's this? Are we getting some adverts here? You're on mute, Eva.
I'm looking forward to Charlie's campaign.
Oh, yes.
I thought you were saying, I'm going to get out my box now that we've finished doing this recording. I thought that's what you were heading for the drinks cupboard. Well, I certainly am. So thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you've enjoyed this as much as we've enjoyed bringing it to you.
Pleasure.
We keep thanking you for your support. And remember, we've got all these different platforms now for you to watch us on. And until we see you again next week, please take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Through a Scottish Prism, the programme that is unapologetically pro-Scottish independence and anti-Westminster rule. Everything we say here is viewed through a Scottish prism. Brought to you by